6 months ago, Emily Carter was the deadliest sniper in her unit. Then, one explosion took everything. Her shoulder shattered, her career erased. And the only job the army gave her was picking up empty shell casings at a forgotten firing range. Most soldiers walked past her without even noticing. But one cold morning, a foreign officer laughed at the idea that American snipers could still make the impossible shot. Emily heard every word. What he didn't know, what no one on that range knew, was that the quiet girl with the brass bucket once learned to shoot from a legend. And that legend was her father. 4 seconds later, one bullet changed everything. Because the shot she was about to take would wake a war her father died trying to finish. The brass casing hit the bottom of the bucket with a hollow, metallic clink. Then another. And another. To everyone else on the range, it was just noise, the ordinary sound of a training day at Redstone Military Range in North Carolina. But to Emily Carter, every casing sounded like a slow applause for a life she no longer had. 6 months earlier, she had been one of the best long-range snipers in the US Army. Now, she was the girl who picked up brass. The cold morning air crept through her fatigues as she moved along the firing line, bucket in one hand, glove brushing through the dirt for spent rounds. Dawn hadn't fully broken yet. A pale grey light stretched across the training field, turning the rows of steel targets into silhouettes against the tree line. Most soldiers didn't even notice her anymore. They stepped around her bucket, stepped around her shadow, stepped around the quiet reminder of what happened when a soldier broke. Emily didn't blame them. Soldiers understood broken things. Broken rifles got replaced. Broken vehicles got scrapped. Broken soldiers got reassigned. 6 months ago, Staff Sergeant Emily Carter had been something entirely different. 2 tours overseas, 47 confirmed combat eliminations, a reputation whispered about in sniper schools across 2 continents. Her longest shot? 2,610 meters across a valley in eastern Afghanistan. A shot so difficult the spotter beside her had whispered afterward, "Nobody's going to believe that." Emily never talked about it. The medal sat inside a drawer she rarely opened, because the medal reminded her what came after. Extraction day, night, rotor blades screaming against desert wind. The helicopter door had just closed when the rocket struck. The explosion tore through the side panel like paper. Shrapnel ripped across Emily's right shoulder. Bone splintered, ligaments shredded. The doctors saved her arm, but they didn't save her career. The medical board meeting lasted 17 minutes. 17 minutes to decide the rest of her life. No combat deployment, no sniper operations, permanent reassignment, range maintenance. Which was how one of the Army's best snipers ended up carrying a metal bucket down a firing line at 6:30 in the morning. Emily bent down and picked up another casing. Clink. The bucket was getting heavy. Her shoulder throbbed. The deep, grinding ache had become a permanent companion. She ignored it. Pain was just background noise. A voice suddenly cut across the range. "Carter!" Emily straightened. Master Sergeant Douglas Reed stood near the entrance gate, clipboard tucked under his arm. His voice carried that familiar flat tone she had heard every morning for 6 months. "Full clean-up today." Emily nodded. "Yes, Master Sergeant. International observers coming through at 900. I want this line spotless." He paused, eyes briefly flicking to the bucket, then away again. "Make sure you cover the long-range platforms too." "Yes, Master Sergeant." He was already walking away before she finished speaking. Emily exhaled slowly and returned to work. She had almost reached the far end of the range when something caught her eye. At first she thought it was nothing, just another steel silhouette on the hillside. But the longer she looked, the stranger it felt. The target sat far beyond the normal firing positions, past the 800-meter markers, past the 1,200-meter line, past anything that made practical sense. Emily squinted. The target was barely visible against the tree line. Her brain did something automatic, something it had been trained to do for over a decade. Distance, angle, elevation, wind drift. Her lips moved quietly. 3,000 meters. She frowned. Why would anyone set a target that far out? Even most sniper training didn't go beyond 2,000. Emily stared for another moment. Then she shook her head. Not her problem anymore. She bent down and dropped another casing into the bucket. Clink. At exactly 0900, the convoy arrived. Black SUVs rolled through the gate with the quiet authority of vehicles that didn't wait in traffic. Emily noticed them without looking directly. Peripheral awareness, another habit from a different life. Officers stepped out, decorated uniforms, foreign military personnel, camera crews, and among them, a tall man in a dark coat with the bearing of someone who had spent decades around rifles. He moved with calm confidence. His pale eyes scanned the range with quiet evaluation. Not curiosity, assessment. Emily recognized the insignia on his sleeve, British Special Operations. The demonstration began an hour later. American snipers fired from the 800-meter platform. Tight groupings, clean hits, polite applause from observers. Then the 1,200-meter stage. Still impressive, still routine. Emily continued picking up brass. Clink, clink, clink. Near the observation platform, the British officer spoke quietly with the base commander. Emily wasn't trying to listen, but wind carried voices, and snipers learned how to hear things people didn't intend them to hear. The officer's voice carried a sharp English accent. Interesting range. The commander nodded. We try to keep our training diverse. The British officer gestured toward the distant hillside. The extreme range target. He paused, then said calmly, Rather optimistic, wouldn't you say? A few of his aides chuckled. 3 kilometers, he continued. Conditions required to make such a shot consistently. He let the sentence trail off, then finished it softly. Aren't something most modern shooters are capable of. The implication landed like a quiet insult. Emily stopped moving. The bucket hung still in her hand. 6 months. 6 months of silence. 6 months of being invisible. 6 months of listening to people talk about snipers like she had never been one. Her shoulder throbbed. The wind shifted across the valley, and suddenly she heard her father's voice in her memory. The world gets quiet before the right shot, Em. She looked again at the distant target. Her brain ran the numbers automatically. Wind speed, angle, bullet drop, 4 seconds of flight time. Her heart beat once, then again. Emily slowly set the bucket down. The metal rang against the concrete. Every head on the firing line turned. Master Sergeant Reed's voice exploded across the range. Carter, what the hell are you doing? But Emily had already started walking, toward the rifle platform, toward the line she had not crossed in 6 months. The base commander raised a hand, stopping Reed. He watched her approach, curious, careful. What is it, Sergeant? Emily stopped at the firing line. Her voice was calm. Permission to attempt the shot, sir. The silence that followed spread across the entire range. Observers, snipers, camera crews. Everyone looked at the woman in dusty fatigues who had been picking up brass 5 minutes ago. The British officer turned slowly toward her. His expression carried polite confusion, then mild amusement. He spoke quietly. Forgive me. His eyes drifted to the bucket she had set down. Did the range custodian just volunteer for a precision demonstration? A few aides laughed. Emily didn't react. She met his gaze directly. Staff Sergeant Emily Carter, sir. Her voice stayed level. 2 deployments, long-range qualified. She gestured toward the distant steel silhouette. I'd like to attempt the shot. The laughter stopped, not gradually, instantly. The British officer studied her face now, not amused anymore, calculating. Then something flickered behind his eyes, recognition. The commander looked between them, then nodded slowly. Very well, Sergeant. He gestured toward the rifle. Show us. Emily walked to the mat. She lifted the rifle. It wasn't hers. Different scope, different balance, unfamiliar weight. Didn't matter. She settled behind the bipod, closed her eyes, and let the world narrow. Wind, distance, breathing. Her father's voice again. Between heartbeats, Em, that's where the shot lives. She opened her eyes. 3,000 meters away, The steel target waited. Emily Carter inhaled slowly and began calculating the impossible. The rifle report cracked across the valley, a sharp thunder that rolled through the trees and echoed across the hills beyond Redstone Range. Emily Carter stayed perfectly still behind the scope, her breathing slowed, controlled, disciplined. Because at that distance, the shot wasn't finished when the trigger broke. It was finished when the bullet arrived, and that would take time, a long time. 4 seconds. The entire range fell silent. No one spoke, no one moved. Even the camera crews had lowered their equipment without realizing it. 4 seconds. To most people, 4 seconds felt like nothing, but to a sniper, 4 seconds was an eternity. Wind drift, gravity, humidity, everything could change. Emily watched through the scope, waiting. Then the radio crackled from the spotting tower. The voice came out shaky. I have a mark. A pause. Another adjustment of the spotting scope. Stand by. Another long breath. Then, impact confirmed. The spotter's voice broke through the quiet. Target hit. Center mass, 3,000 meters. For a moment, nobody reacted. It was as if the entire range needed time to process what had just happened. Then everything erupted at once. Voices, movement, radios, cameras snapping pictures. The quiet training day had suddenly turned into something else entirely. Emily lifted her head from the scope. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She simply placed the rifle down carefully and stood. Across the range, soldiers stared at her. Some looked stunned, others confused. Master Sergeant Reed looked like someone had just knocked the air out of his lungs. But the only person Emily really noticed was the British officer. He was watching her, very closely. The polite amusement from earlier was gone. Now his eyes held something different. Calculation. He approached slowly, boots crunching across gravel. Up close, he looked older than Emily first thought. Early 60s, lean, sharp features. The kind of face that had spent decades outdoors. He stopped a few feet away. Staff Sergeant Carter. His voice carried the quiet authority of someone used to command. That was remarkable. Emily nodded slightly. Thank you, sir. The officer studied her for a moment longer, then asked a strange question. Did anyone ever teach you a technique called eagle breath? Emily felt something inside her chest tighten. Her father's voice echoed in memory, between heartbeats. She answered carefully. Yes. The officer nodded slowly. I thought so. Another pause. Then he said something that made the entire world tilt sideways. Your father used the same method. Emily's eyes sharpened. You knew my father? The officer's expression softened slightly. Yes. He extended a hand. Colonel Arthur Blake. Emily shook it automatically, then asked the question she hadn't expected to ask today. How did you know him? Blake's answer came without hesitation. Daniel Carter trained me. The noise of the range faded in Emily's ears. Her father, Daniel Carter, former Navy sniper. The man who had taught her to shoot in the Tennessee mountains when she was 11. The man who had died suddenly of a heart attack 10 years ago. Emily studied Blake carefully. You served with him? Blake nodded. Late 80s. He looked out toward the distant hills. Your father was one of the finest marksmen I ever saw. Then he glanced back at her. That shot you just made, his lips curved slightly, felt very familiar. Emily didn't answer. Something about this conversation felt strange, like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit yet. Colonel Blake turned to the base commander. Well, he clasped his hands behind his back. I suppose I owe your sniper an apology. The commander chuckled awkwardly. I'd say you do. Blake nodded toward Emily. Quite the family legacy. Then he stepped away, returning to the delegation. But as he left, Emily noticed something. He wasn't smiling anymore. His face had gone serious, thoughtful, almost cautious. The range activity continued for another hour, but the energy had changed. Every soldier there now knew her name. Every officer wanted to ask questions. Emily answered politely, briefly, then eventually slipped away toward the equipment shed. She needed quiet. She had just reached the back of the range when a voice spoke behind her, low, calm. "Hell of a shot." Emily turned instantly. Her hand moved automatically toward where a pistol would normally sit on her belt, except she wasn't carrying one today. The man standing behind her was older, late 60s, white hair, weathered face, civilian clothes. But his posture gave him away instantly. Military, special operations, without question. He leaned against the side of the shed like he had all the time in the world. Emily studied him. "Do I know you?" The man smiled faintly. "No." Then he added something that froze the air between them. "But your father did." Emily felt the same chill she had felt earlier with Blake. "Who are you?" The man straightened, slowly. "My name is Samuel Walker." He paused, then said the name that soldiers across 3 wars had whispered like a ghost story. "Most people used to call me Shade." Emily stared at him. Even she had heard that name. A legendary SEAL sniper, a man whose official records barely existed. "What do you want?" she asked. Shade glanced toward the range where soldiers still talked excitedly about her shot. "I've been watching you for 3 months." Emily's eyes narrowed. "Why?" Shade's answer was quiet. "Because your father asked me to." Emily blinked. "My father died 10 years ago." Shade shook his head slowly. "No." Then he said the sentence that changed everything. "Your father was murdered." The words landed like a rifle shot. Emily's breathing stopped for half a second. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking. My father had a heart attack." "That's what the report said." Shade met her eyes. But that report was a lie. The wind moved through the pine trees around the range. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Emily felt the ground beneath her certainty begin to shift. "My father was a civilian when he died," she said. "He was retired." Shade gave a quiet, humorless smile. "Daniel Carter never retired." Emily didn't answer. Shade stepped closer. "Your father spent the last years of his life investigating something." "What?" "A group." Shade's voice lowered. "A very dangerous one." "What group?" He studied her carefully, then said 2 words. "The Meridian Network." Emily had never heard the name before, but the way Shade said it made her stomach tighten. "What does that have to do with my father?" Shade looked toward the distant mountains. "Everything." He reached into his jacket slowly and pulled out an old photograph. Faded, edges worn. He handed it to her. Emily looked down. 3 men stood on a rooftop overlooking a city, young, in military gear. One of them was her father, much younger, but unmistakable. The second man was Shade, and the third, Emily's heart stopped. Colonel Arthur Blake. She looked up sharply. "He was there?" Shade nodded. 1987. "What were you doing?" Shade's voice went quiet. "Trying to stop something that shouldn't have existed." Emily stared back at the photo. 100 questions crashed through her mind. "My father never told me about this." Shade gave a tired smile. "That's because he was protecting you." He stepped back. "The question now isn't what your father did." Emily looked up slowly. "It's whether you're willing to finish it." Emily felt the same strange calm she always felt before a difficult shot. "What does that mean?" Shade nodded toward the barracks area. "Your father left you something." "What?" "A map." Emily frowned. "He didn't leave me anything except his sniper notebook." Shade's eyes sharpened. "Exactly." The world shifted again. "The notebook?" Emily said slowly. Shade nodded. "Your father hid information in it." "How?" "Ballistics tables. Wind corrections, elevation charts." Shade smiled faintly. "Only they're not ballistics data." Emily felt her pulse quicken. "What are they?" Shade looked her directly in the eyes. "Coordinates." For the first time that day, Emily Carter felt something stronger than curiosity. Purpose. The same feeling she had felt right before taking the shot that morning. A quiet certainty. Her father had been trying to tell her something, and she had only just started listening. Shade turned to leave. "Read the notebook again." He stopped, then added quietly, "And when you do, pay attention to the numbers that don't make sense." Emily watched him walk away across the range. For the first time in 6 months, the future felt dangerous again. Emily Carter hadn't opened her father's notebook in almost a year, not because she didn't want to, but because every time she did, it felt like reopening a door she had spent years trying to close. That night, the notebook lay on her desk under the dim yellow light of the barracks lamp. Black leather, edges worn smooth by time. The same notebook her father had placed in her hands the day she left for sniper school. "Everything I know about shooting is in here," he had told her. Emily remembered the small smile he wore when he said it, a smile that now felt different, like he had known something she didn't. Outside, the base had gone quiet. 2,200 hours. Most of the soldiers had already turned in for the night. Emily sat on the edge of her bed and opened the notebook slowly. The pages smelled faintly of oil and old paper. The first half was exactly what she remembered: wind charts, ballistics tables, range calculations, pages filled with the careful handwriting of a man who treated precision like religion. Her father had believed a sniper's greatest weapon wasn't the rifle, it was patience. Emily flipped through page after page. 1,000 meters, 1,500 meters, 2,000 meters, wind drift corrections, humidity variables. Everything looked normal, exactly the kind of notes any professional sniper might keep. But Shade's voice echoed in her head. "Pay attention to the numbers that don't make sense." Emily slowed down. She began reading differently now, not as a sniper, but as someone looking for a pattern. Her finger traced a line of calculations across the page. Wind correction, 1.8 left. Elevation, +23. Temperature factor, -2. All normal. She turned another page. Wind correction, 3.4 right. Elevation, +41. Humidity factor, +1. Still normal. Then she reached page 47. Emily frowned. Something about the numbers felt off. She ran the calculations in her head. Distance listed, 2,400 meters, but the wind correction was far too precise. The humidity value didn't match any known atmospheric condition, and the elevation adjustment, it wasn't physically possible. She checked the numbers again, and then it hit her. These weren't ballistic calculations, they were something else. Emily grabbed a pen and began rewriting the numbers on a separate sheet. Page number, paragraph, word. She tried the pattern experimentally. Page 47, paragraph 3, word 8. She opened the notebook again and followed the pattern. The word landed in the middle of a sentence. East. Emily's pulse quickened. She tried the next sequence. Page 52, paragraph 1, word 4. Warehouse. Another sequence. Page 63, paragraph 2, word 9. Archive. Emily leaned back slowly. The notebook wasn't a sniper manual. It was a cipher. Her father had hidden a message inside the pages. Her heart began beating faster now. She kept decoding, line after line, word after word. The message slowly began forming on the paper in front of her. East Warehouse River District Locker, 318 Key, Eagle. Emily stared at the words. A location, a key, an archive. Her father had left something behind. A knock on her door broke the silence. 3 slow knocks. Emily's hand instinctively moved under the pillow where her sidearm rested. "Who is it?" A voice answered from the hallway. "Ryan Cole." Emily froze. She knew that name. Ryan Cole worked in Army intelligence. They had crossed paths briefly during base briefings but never spoken directly. "What do you want?" she asked. "I think we need to talk." "How did you know where my room was?" A pause. Then he said something unexpected. "Because Shade told me you'd be looking at the notebook tonight." Emily's hand tightened around the pistol. "How do you know Shade?" "Same way your father did." Another pause. "Open the door, Carter, Or we can have this conversation in the hallway where half the base can hear it. Emily hesitated, then slowly unlocked the door. Ryan Cole stepped inside. He looked younger than she expected. Early 30s, dark hair, eyes that carried the quiet exhaustion of someone who had spent too many years around classified secrets. He glanced at the notebook on the desk. "Looks like you've figured it out." Emily didn't lower the pistol. "What exactly did I figure out?" Ryan pulled a folded sheet from his jacket and placed it on the desk. Coordinates, dozens of them. All the numbers in that notebook point to locations. Emily scanned the page. Some were in the US, others were overseas. "What are they?" Ryan met her eyes. "Evidence." "Evidence of what?" "Murders." The room suddenly felt smaller. Emily lowered the pistol slowly. "My father documented assassinations?" Ryan nodded. "Contract hits." "By who?" He hesitated, then said the same words Shade had said earlier that day. "The Meridian network." Emily crossed her arms. "And you know this because—" Ryan leaned against the wall. "My brother died in Afghanistan." Emily's expression softened slightly. "IED attack," Ryan continued. "That's what the official report said." Emily had heard that sentence before, too many times. "But I spent 3 years digging through intelligence reports," Ryan said quietly. "And eventually I found something strange." "What?" "The convoy route that put my brother on that road was sold." Emily's eyes narrowed. "Sold?" Ryan nodded. "Someone paid to make sure that convoy passed through that valley." The silence between them thickened. "And the payment," Ryan continued, "was traced to Meridian." Emily looked back at the notebook. "My father knew." "Yes." "And he was collecting evidence." "Yes." "For how long?" Ryan thought for a moment. "Probably the last 10 years of his life." Emily felt something twist in her chest. 10 years. Her father had been fighting a war she never knew existed. "And he died for it," she said quietly. Ryan nodded once. "Yes." Emily turned another page in the notebook. More coded numbers, more coordinates, more locations. Then suddenly, she froze. One sequence decoded into 2 words. Edinburgh Symposium. Ryan saw it at the same time. "Wait," he said. "That's next month." Emily looked up slowly. "The International Sniper Event." Ryan nodded. 8 countries. Military delegations, press coverage, thousands of witnesses. Emily felt a cold realization forming. "Why would that be in the notebook?" Ryan answered before she finished the thought. "Because something is going to happen there." Another sequence decoded beneath it. Target: Senator William Hart. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. Senator Hart, chairman of the Senate Intelligence Oversight Committee. Ryan stared at the page. "He's been investigating black budget operations for 2 years." Emily looked up. "You think Meridian is going to kill him?" Ryan didn't answer immediately. Then he said quietly, "I think your father believed they would." Emily closed the notebook slowly. Outside, a helicopter passed somewhere above the base. The distant thump of rotor blades filled the silence. Finally, she asked the question that had been sitting in her mind since the range earlier that day. "What does Arthur Blake have to do with this?" Ryan's eyes hardened. "Everything." Emily felt her stomach tighten. "Blake used to work with your father." "Yes," Ryan nodded. "And now he works with Meridian." Emily stood up. Her shoulder throbbed as she moved. She ignored it. "So the sniper competition in Scotland," Ryan finished the sentence, "is the perfect cover for an assassination." Emily looked back at the notebook, then toward the dark window beyond the barracks. Her father had been trying to stop something big, and now it was happening again. Ryan broke the silence. "Shade thinks Meridian is testing you." Emily looked at him. "Testing me?" Ryan nodded. "That shot today?" He shrugged. "Word travels fast in the sniper world." Emily understood immediately. Arthur Blake had seen the shot, seen her skill, seen Daniel Carter's daughter. Ryan's voice dropped. If Meridian thinks you might have inherited your father's investigation— He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Emily already knew. They would come, or they would watch, or they would try to use her. Emily closed the notebook, then said something that surprised even herself. "We're going to Scotland." Ryan blinked. "You're serious?" "Yes. We don't have authorization." Emily shrugged slightly. "My father didn't either." Ryan studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "That sounds about right." Outside the barracks window, the wind moved through the trees. Somewhere far away, a storm was forming. Emily Carter had spent 6 months believing her war was over. She now understood something else entirely. Her father's war had only just begun, and she had just stepped into it. The invitation arrived the next morning, not by email, not by official military message, but by hand. Emily Carter was halfway through her morning run around the outer perimeter of Redstone Base when the black sedan pulled up beside the road. She slowed instinctively. A man stepped out from the passenger side. Uniform, British, tall, calm. Colonel Arthur Blake. Emily stopped running. Blake gave a polite nod. "Staff Sergeant Carter." Emily wiped sweat from her forehead. "Colonel." He held out a small envelope, cream-colored, no markings, no military seal. An invitation. Emily didn't take it immediately. "To what?" Blake smiled faintly. "I believe you already know." Emily opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a single card, heavy paper, elegant lettering. International Long-Range Marksmanship Symposium. Edinburgh, Scotland. 28 days. 8 military delegations. Elite sniper competition. Observers from NATO Command. Emily read the last line twice. United States Representative, Staff Sergeant Emily Carter. She looked up. "You're inviting me?" Blake clasped his hands behind his back. "After what I saw yesterday?" He shrugged slightly. "It would be a crime not to." Emily studied him carefully. "Why me?" Blake tilted his head slightly. "Because exceptional people deserve exceptional stages." The answer sounded smooth, too smooth. Emily folded the invitation and slipped it back into the envelope. "Who else is going?" 32 shooters. "Countries?" "United States, United Kingdom, Norway, Germany, Canada, France, Italy, and Russia." Emily's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Russia?" Blake nodded. "It's meant to demonstrate cooperation." Emily couldn't help a small smile. "Snipers demonstrating cooperation?" Blake chuckled quietly. "Yes. That's the official explanation." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Blake said something unexpected. "I knew your father quite well." Emily felt the same cold tension she had felt the day before. "You said that yesterday." Blake nodded. "He was my instructor for several months." Emily waited. Blake looked out across the base. "You know what the remarkable thing about your father was?" "What?" "He never missed." Emily said nothing. Blake turned back to her. "Not once." Emily studied his face, trying to read something deeper. "Why are you really inviting me?" Blake's smile faded slightly. "You're suspicious." "My father taught me to be." Blake nodded approvingly. "Good." Then he said quietly, "Because this competition will be interesting." Emily waited. Blake didn't elaborate. Instead, he glanced toward the rising sun over the base. "Consider the invitation carefully." He started walking back toward the sedan, then stopped. "One more thing." Emily looked at him. Blake's eyes held hers now, direct, sharp. "Your father once told me something." Emily didn't answer. "He said the most dangerous sniper isn't the one who shoots the farthest." Blake paused. "It's the one who understands why he's shooting." He opened the car door. "Think about that, Staff Sergeant." Then he drove away. Emily stood there for a long time. The envelope felt heavier in her hand than it should have. By noon, the entire base knew about the invitation. News spread fast, especially when the story involved a 3,000-meter shot. Colonel Harris, the base commander, called Emily into his office. He sat behind the desk studying the official paperwork Blake had delivered earlier. "You realize this is a major honor?" Emily nodded. "Yes, sir. Only one American sniper attends each year." "I understand." Harris leaned back in his chair. "Do you want to go?" Emily didn't answer immediately, because the real question wasn't the competition. It was the notebook, the coordinates, the Meridian network, and the name she had decoded the night before. Edinburgh Symposium. Her father had known, years ago. Emily finally spoke. "Yes, sir." Harris smiled. "I thought you might." That evening, Emily met Ryan Cole near the base motor pool. Ryan leaned against the hood of a jeep. "You got the invite?" Emily nodded. "You already knew?" Ryan shrugged. "Shade told me." Emily handed him the envelope. Ryan whistled softly. "This is the biggest sniper event in the world." "I know." "You're walking straight into it." "I know." Ryan crossed his arms. "You're sure about this?" Emily looked across the empty parking lot. The notebook mentioned Edinburgh. Ryan nodded slowly. "Yeah. That's the problem." Ryan took a deep breath. "You know what this means?" Emily waited. "If Meridian really is planning something at that symposium—" He didn't finish. Emily did. "Then we'll be there when it happens." Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. "You're talking about walking into the middle of a covert assassination." Emily's voice stayed calm. "My father walked into worse." Ryan studied her for several seconds, then nodded once. "Fair point." Shade appeared an hour later. No one saw him arrive. He simply leaned against the wall of the empty shooting range when Emily returned. "You accepted?" Emily wasn't surprised. "You already knew I would." Shade smiled faintly. "You're your father's daughter." Emily crossed her arms. "Tell me what you know about Edinburgh." Shade's expression darkened slightly. "Not enough." "That's reassuring." "It's the truth." Shade looked out across the quiet range. "But I know this much." "What?" "Meridian doesn't do anything small." Emily waited. "If they're planning something at that symposium—" Shade's eyes shifted toward her. "It's going to be big." Emily opened the notebook again. Page 63. More coded numbers. More coordinates. Ryan and Shade stood beside her. Emily decoded another sequence. 3 words appeared. Cathedral Tower. Ryan frowned. "Edinburgh Castle has a direct line of sight from several towers." Shade nodded slowly. "Long range." Emily continued decoding. More words formed beneath it. "Primary position." Ryan looked up. "That's a sniper nest." Emily nodded. "Yes." Shade's face went still. "Your father mapped their firing position." Ryan's voice dropped. "How long ago?" Emily checked the margin of the page. The date written beside the cipher made her stomach tighten. 10 years. The room went quiet. Ryan leaned forward. "You're telling me Meridian has been planning this for a decade?" Emily shook her head slowly. "No." She pointed at the page. "My father knew they would." Shade exhaled quietly. "Daniel Carter always did think 10 moves ahead." Emily looked at the final line of the decoded message, then read it aloud. "Shooter will be elite." Ryan laughed quietly. "Well, that narrows it down." Emily's eyes moved slowly across the room. Then she said something that made both men look at her. "It could be Blake." Ryan's eyebrows shot up. "You think he's the shooter?" Emily didn't answer, but Shade did. "No." They both looked at him. Shade's voice was calm. "Arthur Blake doesn't pull the trigger." Ryan frowned. "Then what does he do?" Shade's eyes hardened. He hires the people who do. The three of them stood in silence. Finally, Ryan said, "So we go to Scotland?" Emily nodded. "Yes." Ryan sighed. "Great." He rubbed his face. "We're about to walk into an international sniper convention that may secretly be a murder plot." Emily shrugged. "Sounds like a normal week." Shade chuckled quietly, then his expression turned serious again. "Just remember one thing." Emily looked at him. Shade spoke slowly. "If Meridian realizes you know what they're planning—" He didn't finish the sentence. Emily understood anyway. She closed the notebook. "They already suspect." Ryan frowned. "What makes you say that?" Emily thought about Arthur Blake watching her after the shot, that calculating look in his eyes. "That invitation," she said quietly, "wasn't a reward." Ryan looked confused. "What was it then?" Emily met his gaze. "A test." Outside, a storm was rolling toward the base, dark clouds gathering over the horizon. Emily Carter had spent 6 months believing her life as a sniper was finished. Now she was about to enter the most dangerous mission of her life. And this time, the target might not be steel. The flight to Scotland felt longer than it should have. Emily Carter spent most of the journey staring out the window, watching the Atlantic stretch endlessly below the plane. Dark water, cold sky. Somewhere beyond that horizon, a city was waiting. And inside that city, if her father's notebook was right, someone was preparing to kill a senator. Ryan Cole sat beside her, flipping through a small tablet filled with intelligence notes. He finally sighed and set it down. "You ever notice how every bad idea starts with an airplane ticket?" Emily didn't look away from the window. "This wasn't my idea." Ryan smirked. "You accepted the invitation." Emily turned slightly. "You came with me." Ryan nodded. "Fair point." The plane touched down just outside Edinburgh shortly after noon. The Scottish sky hung low and grey over the runway. Cold winds swept across the airport as the delegation stepped off the transport buses. Emily took a slow breath. Different air, different continent. Same tension she had felt before missions overseas. That quiet feeling in the back of her mind that told her something important was about to happen. The competition grounds had been built on the outskirts of the city, a wide valley surrounded by old stone hills and patches of forest. Temporary shooting platforms stretched across the terrain. Flags from 8 different nations moved slowly in the wind. American, British, Norwegian, German, French, Italian, Canadian, Russian. Emily scanned the area the way snipers always did, automatically. Elevated positions, rooftops, tree lines, tower structures. Her brain built firing angles without conscious effort. Ryan noticed. "You're doing the thing." Emily didn't look at him. "What thing?" "The sniper thing." "What sniper thing?" Ryan gestured at the hills. "Calculating where people could shoot from." Emily shrugged. "Habit." Ryan lowered his voice. "You find anything interesting?" Emily nodded toward the skyline of Edinburgh in the distance. 3 good long-range positions. Ryan blinked. "You figured that out already?" Emily nodded. "Yes." Then she added quietly, "And one of them is a cathedral tower." Ryan didn't say anything after that. The first person Emily saw when they arrived at the registration area was Arthur Blake. He stood near the observation tent speaking with several officers. When he noticed Emily approaching, his expression warmed. "Staff Sergeant Carter." Emily stopped in front of him. "Colonel." Blake gestured around the valley. "Welcome to Scotland." Ryan crossed his arms. "Nice place." Blake nodded politely. "Thank you." His eyes returned to Emily. "I trust the flight was comfortable?" "It was fine." Blake studied her face for a moment, then asked quietly, "Looking forward to the competition?" Emily met his gaze evenly. "I'm looking forward to seeing how it works." Blake smiled faintly. "Good answer." He handed her a small packet of event information. "Tomorrow begins with the standard qualification stages. Distances? 1,000 meters. Then 1,500. And the final stage? Blake's smile returned. Extreme range. Emily tilted her head slightly. How extreme? Blake leaned closer. 3 kilometers. Ryan muttered under his breath. Of course it is. The afternoon passed with registration briefings and equipment inspections. Snipers from different countries tested rifles and scopes on the practice ranges. Emily watched them carefully. Not judging skill, judging behavior. Snipers revealed a lot about themselves in the way they moved. Confidence, patience, discipline, or the lack of it. Most of the competitors were exactly what she expected. Highly trained, professional, quiet. But 2 men near the Russian shooting platform caught her attention immediately. They were tall, heavy coats, military patches, but something about them didn't fit. They watched the terrain more than the targets. Their eyes moved constantly, checking angles, distances. Emily leaned slightly toward Ryan. See the Russians? Ryan glanced casually. Which ones? The 2 near the equipment truck. Ryan studied them for several seconds, then nodded slowly. Yeah. Military? Ryan shook his head. Not exactly. What do you mean? Ryan lowered his voice. Private contractors. Emily felt her suspicion deepen. Working for Meridian? Ryan shrugged. Could be. A voice spoke quietly behind them. You noticed them too. Emily turned instantly. A woman stood there, early 40s. Blonde hair tied back tightly. Calm expression. A Norwegian flag patch on her jacket. She extended a hand. Captain Sophia Larson. Emily shook it cautiously. Emily Carter. Ryan raised an eyebrow. You work intelligence? Sophia smiled faintly. Among other things. Emily watched her carefully. How long have you been observing them? Sophia answered immediately. 3 days. Ryan blinked. 3 days? Sophia nodded. We've been tracking a pattern of sniper assassinations across Europe. Emily felt the air grow colder. What kind of assassinations? Long distance. Professional. Extremely precise. Ryan's voice dropped. Meridian. Sophia met his eyes. Yes. Emily felt the puzzle pieces sliding together faster now. Who's the target? Sophia didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward the city skyline, then said quietly, Senator William Hart. Ryan exhaled slowly. Of course. Emily crossed her arms. When? Sophia nodded toward the city. Day 3 of the symposium. Where? Edinburgh Castle. Ryan frowned. That's nearly 2 kilometers from here. Sophia nodded. Perfect distance for a demonstration shot. Emily understood instantly. The cameras. Yes. Ryan finished the thought. The competition gives the shooter cover. Sophia nodded. Exactly. Emily looked back toward the Russian contractors. They're not the only shooters. Sophia smiled slightly. No. How many? At least 3. Ryan cursed quietly. The wind shifted across the valley. Clouds moved slowly above the hills. Emily felt the same calm focus settling over her again, the kind that came before dangerous missions. What's the plan? She asked. Sophia studied her. You're the American competitor. Yes. You stay in the competition. Emily nodded. Why? Because if Meridian suspects we know anything. Sophia paused. They'll cancel the operation. Ryan nodded slowly. And disappear? Emily looked toward the cathedral tower in the distance, then back at Sophia. You want us to bait them? Sophia didn't deny it. Ryan rubbed his face. This keeps getting worse. Emily ignored him. When do we move? Sophia looked at her carefully. You're not backing out? Emily almost laughed. My father spent 10 years building evidence against Meridian. She met Sophia's eyes. I'm not quitting on day 1. Sophia nodded slowly. Good. Then she lowered her voice. Because the shooter who takes that shot will be one of the best snipers in the world. Ryan muttered. Great. Emily's eyes drifted toward the observation tent. Arthur Blake stood there watching the valley. watching the competitors, watching everything. Emily spoke quietly. "Maybe the best sniper here." Ryan followed her gaze. "You still think it's him?" Emily didn't answer, but she couldn't shake the feeling. Arthur Blake hadn't invited her here for a competition. He had invited her for something else. That night, Emily stood alone on the balcony outside her hotel room, overlooking the old stone streets of Edinburgh. Wind moved through the narrow alleys below. Somewhere a church bell rang in the distance. She opened her father's notebook again. The final line of the cipher stared back at her. "The last shot defines you." Emily closed the book slowly, then whispered into the cold night air, "Let's see who takes it." The morning of day 3 arrived colder than the others. A sharp wind moved through the valley outside Edinburgh, carrying the scent of rain from the distant highlands. Perfect sniper weather, clear air, long visibility, unforgiving wind. Emily Carter stood on the competition line with 31 other shooters from around the world. Rows of rifles rested on bipods. Spotters crouched beside them. Camera crews lined the edges of the range. Today was the final event, extreme range, 3 kilometers. The same distance Emily had fired at Redstone Range weeks earlier. Only today, the stakes were very different. Arthur Blake stood on the observation platform, speaking calmly into a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "today we conclude the International Long-Range Marksmanship Symposium with the most difficult discipline in modern precision shooting." He gestured toward the distant hillside. 3,000 meters. A ripple of quiet excitement moved through the crowd. Even among elite snipers, shots beyond 2 kilometers were rare. 3 kilometers bordered on legend. Blake continued. "Competitors will fire 1 round each. Wind conditions are variable. Good luck." His eyes briefly met Emily's across the range, and for a moment she felt something she hadn't noticed before. Expectation. Ryan Cole stood behind the observation barrier, binoculars raised. In his ear, a small radio crackled softly. Sophia Larson's voice whispered through the channel. "Movement confirmed at Cathedral Tower." Ryan swallowed. "Shooter?" "Yes. 2 individuals." Ryan looked toward the skyline of Edinburgh. The old cathedral tower stood above the rooftops like a stone spear. Distance from the castle, roughly 1,400 meters. Perfect for a long-range shot. Ryan spoke quietly. "Emily, you hearing this?" Emily didn't move her head, but her voice came through the small earpiece hidden beneath her collar. "Copy." Across the city, inside the ancient stone tower, a man assembled a rifle. Long barrel, suppressed, heavy optic. He worked with calm, professional precision. Beside him, another man watched through a spotting scope. "Target will appear on balcony in 3 minutes." The shooter nodded. "Wind?" "Light crosswind." The shooter adjusted his elevation turret. Easy shot. Back at the competition line, Emily lay behind her rifle. Her breathing slowed. But she wasn't looking at the competition target. She was watching the skyline through her scope. Ryan's voice returned in her ear. "Second shooter confirmed." Emily's pulse quickened. "Where?" "Office building south of the castle." Emily adjusted the scope slightly. There, another rooftop, another rifle, 2 shooters, 2 angles, 2 chances to kill the senator. Ryan whispered, "This is bad." Emily stayed calm. "No, it's worse than bad." Inside the cathedral tower, the primary shooter leaned into the rifle. The senator stepped onto the balcony of Edinburgh Castle below. Camera crews surrounded him, microphones, reporters, the world watching. The shooter exhaled slowly, finger moving toward the trigger. Ryan's voice cut through Emily's headset. "Target exposed." Emily adjusted her scope. Through the glass, she saw the tower window. The shooter was there, rifle steady, professional, calm. 3 seconds from firing. "Emily," Ryan whispered urgently, "you don't have a clean angle." He was right. The tower wall partially blocked her line of sight. She could see the rifle, but not the shooter's body. Emily's brain raced. Wind, distance, trajectory. If she tried to shoot the sniper directly, she would miss, and the senator would die. Ryan's voice cracked. "Emily, we're out of time." In the tower, the sniper squeezed the trigger. The rifle fired with a soft, suppressed crack. The bullet began its long flight toward Edinburgh Castle. Emily moved instantly. Her mind calculated faster than conscious thought. Distance from her position to the tower, 370 meters. Distance from the tower to the senator, 1,400 meters. Bullet speed, time of flight, trajectory arc. The only way to stop the shot was to intercept it. Ryan realized what she was doing. "Oh my God," Emily whispered quietly. Between heartbeats, her father's voice echoed in memory. "The world stops there." Emily squeezed the trigger. Her rifle thundered across the valley. The round left the barrel at nearly 900 meters per second. For a fraction of a second, two bullets crossed the same sky, one flying toward death, one flying to stop it. Inside Edinburgh Castle, Senator William Hart continued speaking. "For too long, covert programs have operated without accountability." 40 feet from his head, the two bullets collided. A sharp, metallic crack echoed against the castle stone. Both rounds shattered in mid-air. Fragments ricocheted harmlessly against the wall behind him. The senator stopped speaking, confused, but alive. Ryan stared through his binoculars. "Holy!" He lowered them slowly. "You did it!" Chaos erupted inside the cathedral tower. The sniper jerked backward in shock. "What the hell?" A flashbang exploded beneath the stairwell. Samuel "Shade" Walker stormed into the tower seconds later. The sniper barely had time to reach for his sidearm before Shade tackled him to the floor. On the southern rooftop, the backup shooter tried to reposition. Too late. Sophia Larson and two intelligence agents burst through the stairwell door behind him, weapons drawn. "Don't move!" The rifle clattered onto the concrete. The assassin raised his hands slowly. Back at the range, Emily lowered her rifle. The crowd hadn't realized what had happened. Most of them believed the loud echo from the city was just thunder. Ryan's phone buzzed. A text message appeared. Unknown number. Ryan turned the screen toward Emily. She read it. "Well done, Miss Carter. Your father would be proud." Emily looked toward the observation platform. Arthur Blake stood beside his car, watching her. Blake raised his phone again. Another message arrived. "But this game isn't finished." Emily stared back across the valley. The wind moved through the Scottish hills. The storm clouds overhead finally began to break. Ryan exhaled slowly. "So," he looked at her, "did we just stop an assassination with a mid-air bullet intercept?" Emily placed the rifle down carefully. "Yes." Ryan shook his head in disbelief. "That's impossible." Emily shrugged slightly. "My father did it once." Ryan blinked. "You're serious?" Emily nodded. 1986. Ryan stared at her. "Your family is terrifying." Sirens began echoing across Edinburgh as police vehicles raced toward the cathedral and castle. But the real story hadn't even started yet. Emily knew that, because Arthur Blake was still standing across the valley, watching, waiting, and somewhere deep inside the Meridian network, someone had just realized that Daniel Carter's daughter was still alive, and still fighting. The interrogation room smelled like cold coffee and old metal. Emily Carter stood behind the one-way glass with her arms crossed. Inside the room, Arthur Blake sat calmly at a steel table. Two British intelligence officers sat across from him. No handcuffs, no panic, no fear. Just a man who had already decided how the conversation would end. Ryan Cole stood beside Emily, watching through the glass. "He doesn't look like someone who just got his operation destroyed." Emily didn't answer, because Ryan was right. Blake didn't look defeated. He looked relieved. The door opened. Samuel Shade Walker stepped into the observation room. His expression was unreadable. "They picked up both shooters," he said quietly. Ryan nodded. "Alive?" "Yes." "Talking?" Shade shrugged. "Eventually." Emily kept watching Blake. "What about him?" Shade glanced through the glass. "He asked for you." Ryan frowned. "That's not suspicious at all." Emily turned toward Shade. "You think I should talk to him?" Shade studied her for a moment, then nodded once. "Yes." Ryan looked between them. "Are we sure that's a good idea?" Shade answered calmly. "It's the only way we get the truth." 5 minutes later, Emily walked into the interrogation room. The door closed behind her with a heavy, metallic click. Blake looked up. His expression softened slightly. "Emily." She remained standing. "You almost had someone killed." Blake tilted his head. "Almost." Emily didn't react. "Why?" Blake leaned back in his chair. "That's a complicated question." "Try." Blake studied her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Because your father asked me to." Emily felt the words land like a hammer. "That's not funny." Blake didn't smile. "I'm not joking. My father spent 10 years investigating Meridian." "Yes." "And Meridian killed him." Blake's eyes held hers. "No." Emily's voice sharpened. "What do you mean, no?" Blake leaned forward slowly. "Your father knew he was going to die." Emily felt her pulse quicken. "You're lying." Blake shook his head. "Your father understood Meridian better than anyone." "Then why didn't he run?" Blake's voice dropped. "Because he needed them to think they had won." Emily stared at him. "What are you talking about?" Blake reached into the folder on the table. The intelligence officers had left it there. He pulled out a photograph, then slid it across the table. Emily looked down. It showed a small room filled with binders, documents, files, boxes, a hidden archive. Blake spoke quietly. "Your father spent 12 years building a case against Meridian." Emily's heart began to race. "What case?" "The kind that destroys organizations." Blake folded his hands. "Financial records, assassination contracts, names of every operative." Emily looked back at the photograph. "Where is this?" Blake answered without hesitation. "Quantico." Emily blinked. "The Armory Archive." Blake nodded. "Sublevel 3. Ryan's voice suddenly echoed in her memory from the previous night. "Your father collected evidence." Emily looked back at Blake. If he had that evidence, why didn't he expose Meridian? Blake's expression grew heavier. "Because he needed someone else to finish it." Emily felt the room grow smaller. "Who?" Blake met her eyes. "You." The silence between them stretched for several seconds. "You expect me to believe that?" Blake shrugged slightly. "Believe whatever you want." Emily stepped closer to the table. "You helped them kill him." Blake shook his head. "No." Emily's voice dropped. "Then who did?" Blake hesitated. For the first time since the interrogation began, then he said quietly, "Meridian's counsel ordered it." "Who are they?" Blake didn't answer. Instead, he asked a question of his own. "Do you know what the hardest decision your father ever made was?" Emily didn't respond. Blake continued. "Beirut, 1987. Emily frowned slightly. "My father never talked about Beirut." "No." Blake nodded. "He wouldn't." Emily's voice hardened. "What happened there?" Blake leaned back again. "Your father and I discovered Meridian's first assassination contract." Emily's stomach tightened. "What did he do?" "He reported it." "And?" Blake looked toward the ceiling for a moment. "They ordered him to stand down." Emily's eyes narrowed. "And he obeyed?" Blake nodded slowly. "Yes." Emily felt something twist inside her chest. "How many people died?" Blake answered quietly. 241. The number echoed in the room. Emily whispered. "That's why he spent the rest of his life investigating them." Blake nodded. "Yes." Emily closed her eyes for a moment. The weight of it pressed against her chest. Her father had carried that guilt for decades. Blake's voice softened. He believed the only way to fix it was to destroy Meridian legally. Emily opened her eyes again. That's why he gathered evidence. Yes. And that's why they killed him. Blake nodded. They discovered he was close to exposing them. Emily clenched her fists. So he died for nothing? Blake shook his head slowly. No. Emily looked at him sharply. What do you mean? Blake gestured toward her. You stopped the assassination today. Emily stared at him. Your father predicted Meridian would try again. Blake slid another paper across the table. Emily read the words slowly. Edinburgh, Phase 2. Her father's handwriting. Emily felt her breath catch. He knew. Blake nodded. He always knew. Emily leaned against the table. The anger inside her chest slowly shifted into something else. Understanding. My father planned all of this. Blake nodded. He built the trap. Emily looked at him carefully. Then what were you doing here? Blake smiled faintly, making sure the trap worked. Emily blinked. You were helping us? Blake shrugged slightly. Let's say I changed sides. Ryan suddenly entered the room. The door opened sharply behind Emily. That's convenient. Blake glanced toward him. Sometimes truth is. Ryan crossed his arms. So you're suddenly the good guy. Blake didn't answer. Instead, he looked back at Emily. Your father once told me something. Emily waited. He said the last shot a sniper takes is the one that defines who they become. Blake's voice softened. Today you made that shot. Emily stood silently. Everything she believed about the past had shifted. Her father hadn't failed. He had prepared the battlefield, and she had just taken the shot he had been waiting for. Outside the interrogation building, the evening sky over Edinburgh had begun to clear. Ryan walked beside Emily toward the parking lot. Well, Ryan said quietly, that was a lot to process. Emily nodded. Yes. Ryan glanced at her. What happens now? Emily looked toward the distant castle walls. Now we find the archive. Ryan blinked. You're serious? Emily nodded. My father didn't spend 12 years collecting evidence for it to sit in a basement. Ryan smiled faintly. Fair point. Emily looked toward the horizon. The war he started isn't over yet. 3 weeks later, Emily Carter stood in front of a steel door buried deep beneath Quantico Armory. The hallway smelled faintly of concrete dust and cold metal. Ryan Cole leaned against the wall beside her, holding a flashlight. You sure this is the place? Emily looked down at the notebook in her hands. Her father's handwriting was unmistakable. Sublevel 3, Locker 318. Key, Eagle. She nodded. Yes. Ryan exhaled slowly. Feels like we're about to open a time capsule. Emily stepped toward the door. The keypad blinked softly in the dim hallway light. She typed the code carefully. Eagle. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the lock clicked. The heavy door opened with a long mechanical groan. The room beyond was larger than Emily expected. Fluorescent lights flickered on automatically as the door swung wider. Rows of shelves filled the underground chamber. Binders, boxes, stacks of documents, thousands of pages. Ryan stepped inside slowly. Holy! His voice faded as he walked between the shelves. This is everything. Emily moved deeper into the archive. Her fingers brushed across the spine of one binder. Meridian Network, Financial Operations. Another binder. Contract Assassinations, 1985 to 2010. Another. Operative Identities. Ryan shook his head in disbelief. Your father documented the entire organization. Emily said quietly. He knew someone would finish it. Ryan opened one of the binders and flipped through the pages. Bank transfers, shell companies, political contracts. He looked up slowly. This isn't just evidence. Emily nodded. It's a blueprint. Ryan stared around the room again. Meridian isn't going to survive this. 2 months later, the investigation exploded across international news. Governments launched joint operations. Intelligence agencies opened sealed files. Within 48 hours, 31 arrests, 9 countries, frozen the counts,
seized assets. Meridian's leadership collapsed almost overnight. The organization that had hidden in the shadows for 40 years was suddenly exposed. Every document pointed back to one man, Daniel Carter. Emily watched the news report from a quiet hotel room in Washington. Ryan sat on the couch across from her, reading the latest intelligence briefing. They're calling it the biggest covert network exposure since the Cold War. Emily didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on the television screen. Reporters stood outside government buildings around the world. Politicians denied involvement. Former contractors disappeared. The Meridian network was unraveling faster than anyone expected. Ryan lowered the report. You know what the craziest part is? Emily glanced toward him. What? Ryan smiled slightly. Your father did almost all of this by himself. Emily thought about the notebook, the years he spent gathering information, the life he risked to collect it. He didn't do it alone, she said quietly. Ryan frowned slightly. What do you mean? Emily looked out the window toward the city skyline. He knew someone would finish it. A week later, Emily received a message. It came from a federal prosecutor in Virginia, a formal request for testimony. Ryan met her outside the courthouse. You ready? Emily nodded. I think so. Ryan smiled faintly. You just helped dismantle the most sophisticated assassination network in modern history. Emily shrugged. Feels like paperwork. Ryan laughed. Your definition of paperwork is terrifying. The hearing lasted 6 hours. Emily answered every question calmly. Her father's notebook sat on the evidence table beside her, every page now part of the official record. When it was over, the prosecutor approached her quietly. Your father was a remarkable man. Emily nodded. Yes. He kept records no one else thought to keep. Emily looked down at the notebook. He believed the truth mattered. The prosecutor smiled. It does.
6 weeks later, Emily returned to Redstone Base. The place looked the same. Same shooting platforms, same distant hills, same quiet wind moving through the pine trees. But something felt different. Master Sergeant Reed stood waiting near the range entrance. He cleared his throat awkwardly when she approached. Staff Sergeant Carter. Emily nodded. Master Sergeant? Reed rubbed the back of his neck. I owe you an apology. Emily raised an eyebrow. For what? For thinking you were finished. Emily smiled slightly. The brass still needed picking up. Reed laughed despite himself. Yeah, he hesitated. But I was wrong about you. Emily shrugged. It happens. Later that afternoon, Colonel Harris called her into his office. He slid a folder across the desk. Emily opened it slowly. Inside was an official transfer order. Advanced Sniper Training Program Instructor Assignment. Emily looked up. You want me to teach? Harris nodded. You've seen more than most instructors. Emily thought about the past few months, about Scotland, about Meridian, about her father. What kind of program? Harris smiled. One built around a simple idea. What idea? Harris leaned back in his chair. That the hardest part of being a sniper isn't pulling the trigger. Emily felt a quiet warmth rise in her chest. My father used to say that. Harris nodded. I know. 3 months later, the Carter Precision Training Program opened at Redstone Range. 24 students stood in formation on the first morning. Young soldiers, nervous, ambitious. Emily walked slowly down the line. Each of them held a rifle. Each of them believed the hardest part of the job was the shot itself. Emily stopped at the center of the formation. Before we begin, she said calmly, I want you to understand something. The students listened carefully. Emily continued.
Anyone can learn the math. Anyone can learn the wind. Anyone can learn how to shoot. She paused. But the shot isn't the hard part. One of the students raised a hand. What is? Emily looked out across the range, toward the distant hills, toward the same 3-kilometer target she had fired at months earlier. Then she said quietly, the decision before the shot. That evening, Emily stood alone on the range,
as the sun dipped below the trees. The long shadows stretched across the valley. She opened her father's notebook one last time. The final page contained a single handwritten sentence. "The last shot defines you." Emily closed the notebook gently. For years she had believed her father died fighting a war he couldn't win. Now she understood the truth. He hadn't failed. He had simply passed the rifle forward. Somewhere beyond the hills, the world was still complicated, still dangerous. But tonight the wind was quiet, and the range was peaceful. Emily Carter looked out across the valley and smiled slightly, because the hardest shot had never been the one that saved the senator, or the one that hit the steel target 3 kilometers away. The hardest shot was the one that chose what kind of person she would become after. And now she knew.